You're in the shower, or driving, or lying there at 1 in the morning with the ceiling doing nothing to help you. And you're mid-sentence to someone who isn't in the room, who isn't even thinking about you right now, finally saying the thing you didn't say on Tuesday. Not the safe version, the real one. The one with the timing fixed, the tone sharper, the ending you actually wanted. There's a conversation you're still having. It ended 3 weeks ago. Everyone involved has moved on. You haven't. It just changed venues, from the kitchen or the parking lot or the group chat to somewhere behind your eyes where it never has to end because you're the only one still in the room. If you think this makes you strange or thin-skinned or bad at letting things go, it doesn't. It makes you extremely normal. When researchers asked people to name their most painful life regrets, the answers weren't about money or the job they didn't take or the house they didn't buy. They were about people, what they said, what they didn't. Regret tied to a relationship doesn't just show up more often than regret tied to achievement. It hits harder. It sits longer. It's the one your mind keeps opening back up, uninvited, at 1 in the morning. A Roman Stoic wrote an entire book about this exact habit of mind. Not to tell you it makes you weak. He wrote it because he did it too, and he wanted to know why the mind won't let a finished conversation stay finished. Turns out that tightness in your chest has a very specific, very boring explanation. Researchers put people through a version of this on purpose. Walk into a room, deliver a talk in front of a panel of 3, strangers, arms crossed, instructed in advance to give you nothing. No nodding, no smiling, no just flat, unreadable faces while you talk about yourself for 5 minutes, followed by a pop quiz of subtraction problems, out loud under a clock. It's designed to be exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. Afterward, some people got handed something neutral to do, a puzzle, a magazine, anything else. Others were left alone with their thoughts, which meant, in practice, they replayed it, went back over what they said, what the panel's faces meant, what they should have said instead. The ones who replayed it had higher stress hormone levels, not just right after, hours later. One version of the study kept sampling into the evening and found the replaying group's levels hadn't returned to baseline the way the distracted groups had, still measurably elevated at bedtime from a 5-minute conversation that ended that morning. Your chest gets tight an hour after the argument ended, and you assume that's just you being sensitive. It isn't sensitivity. It's chemistry. The exchange is over. Your bloodstream didn't get the memo because you're still narrating a version of it that hasn't ended yet. And as far as your body is concerned, a story still being told is a threat still in the room. I once rebuilt an entire argument with my brother in the shower. 10 minutes, escalating, airtight, every line landing exactly where I wanted it to. The real conversation was 90 seconds and mostly about parking. My chest didn't know that. It just knew it was under attack, again, for the second time that day, and it responded accordingly, which would almost be funny if it weren't costing you something real. You'd think all that replaying gets you closer to the truth of what happened. It does the opposite. The instinct feels productive. Go over it again. Catch what you missed. Figure out exactly where it went wrong so you can fix it next time. That's not what's happening. What's happening is closer to editing a film you already released, except every cut you make gets treated as the original footage. Psychologists have a name for this specific habit: post-event processing. It shows up most in people who walk out of a conversation and immediately start reviewing it, what they said, how it landed, what the other person's face meant. And here's the part that doesn't match the intention behind it. People who do this consistently rate their own performance worse than a neutral observer watching the same exchange would. Not slightly worse. Worse in a way that gets more exaggerated the more times they go back over it. Here's the detail that should bother you more than it probably will. In some of these studies, people got positive feedback afterward, someone else confirming they'd actually done fine. It didn't matter. The replaying mind kept the negative version anyway, filed the compliment somewhere it couldn't reach, and went right on rehearsing the 5 seconds where your voice cracked instead of the 20 minutes that went completely fine. You're not remembering the conversation, you're re-editing it, and every pass makes the footage a little more damning than the one before, because anxious attention doesn't review evenly. It hunts for the worst frame, lingers there, and throws out anything that contradicts the verdict it's already reached. For years I thought going over it more meant I cared more, or noticed more, or was somehow more self-aware than someone who just shrugged and moved on. It didn't mean any of that. It just meant I hadn't stopped. The replaying wasn't insight. It was just volume, dressed up as depth. So if replaying it isn't the fix, what is? Seneca knew a man who did the exact same thing every night, and it never once kept him up. The man's name was Sextius, not a household name, not one of the philosophers who ends up on a poster. But Seneca studied under him and picked up a habit from him that he kept for the rest of his life. Every night, after the lamp went out and the house went quiet, Sextius would lie there and ask his own mind 3 questions. What bad habit did you cure today? What did you resist? Where are you better than you were this morning? Then he'd answer, honestly, out loud sometimes to no one, and then he'd sleep. Seneca adopted the exact same ritual and wrote about it later, almost proudly. Not as a rare occasion, every single night without exception for years. He described the moment precisely. The light taken away, his wife already familiar enough with the habit to go quiet beside him without asking, and then he'd go through the whole day, start to finish, out loud in his own head. Every conversation, every word, nothing skipped, nothing softened. He said he pleaded his case before himself the way a lawyer would before a judge. And then, once the verdict was delivered, he was done. For the moment, I excuse you. Notice what that isn't. It isn't suppression. He's not telling himself to stop thinking about the day. He's doing the opposite, deliberately going back over every conversation, every mistake, every moment he wishes had gone differently. The difference is that his version has a shape, 3 questions, a start, an end, and a verdict delivered once that he was allowed to walk away from. The review didn't get to run twice. It got exactly 1 pass every night, and then the account closed whether it felt finished or not. I used to think Stoic meant don't think about it, push it down, move on, stay unbothered. Turns out that's backwards. The guy thought about it every single night, on purpose, with a deadline. He wasn't avoiding the review. He was just refusing to let it run without one. And 2,000 years later, the reason his method worked finally has a name. It was never about how much you replay it. It's about the shape of the question you're replaying it with. There's a difference between asking, why did I say that, and asking, what will I say differently next time? They feel similar. They are not similar. One sends you in circles, the other actually goes somewhere. Researchers who study this drew the same line Sextius drew, just with different tools. They found that repetitive thinking splits cleanly into 2 categories based on one thing: how abstract or how concrete the question is. Abstract questions, why does this always happen to me? Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Correlate with worse mood, longer distress, and no actual resolution. Concrete questions, what specifically happened? What will I do differently? What's the next right move? Correlate with recovery, not eventually. Measurably, in the same study, in the same people, depending on which version of the question they were asked to use. Same event, same amount of thinking about it. Opposite outcome, based entirely on the shape of the question. Picture the 2 versions side by side. Abstract. Why does he always do this to me? Why am I the one who has to deal with it? What does that even say about our whole relationship? That's not analysis. That's just the same 3 feelings wearing different sentences, on a loop, going nowhere. Concrete. What did he actually say? What do I want to say back? When's the right moment to say it? That version has an exit. The abstract one doesn't. It's not built to end. It's built to keep circling the same wound from a slightly different angle each time. Which means Sextius wasn't just disciplined, he was accidentally precise. What fault did you cure is a concrete question. What did you resist is a concrete question. Not one of his 3 questions was, why am I like this? He built the correct shaped question by instinct, centuries before anyone could put a name on why it mattered. And it's the exact shape a modern lab would later confirm actually works. Your version of the replay, the shower argument, the 11th draft of the thing you should have said. That's almost always running on the wrong shape of question. Why did they say that? Why do I always do this? Why can't I let it go? Which means the fix was never willpower. It was structure. You don't need to stop thinking about it. You need to give it an appointment. There's a technique researchers landed on decades ago for people whose minds wouldn't stop circling the same worry. Not stop worrying. Nobody can just do that on command. Instead, pick a window. 10 minutes, same time every day. And when the thought shows up outside that window, in the shower, in the car, at 1 in the morning. You don't fight it and you don't follow it. You notice it, you name it, out loud if you have to, not now. You have an appointment later. Then you go back to whatever you were doing. Across the studies, that alone was enough to cut down how often the thought showed up and how long it stuck around once it did. Not because the mind stopped caring, because the mind stopped being allowed to run the same loop on demand at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in the middle of a meeting for the 9th time that week. You already know what this is. It's Sextius in a lab coat 3 centuries later. Same idea, same shape. A boundary the thought isn't allowed to cross, and a room it's allowed to exist in for exactly as long as you say so. The conversation you're still having, the one from the hook, the one that ended 3 weeks ago and never quite left. It doesn't need you to win it. It doesn't need the perfect version of what you should have said. It needs 10 minutes tonight. Not 10 minutes of replaying it the way you already have 100 times. 10 minutes of 3 concrete questions. What actually happened, what you'd do differently, where you're better for having gone through it. Answer them once, honestly. Out loud if the house is quiet enough. Then, like the man who taught Seneca how to sleep, for the moment, you're excused. I still lose the argument in the shower sometimes. I just don't let it follow me out anymore. If this is the 6th conversation this month that's still open in your head, you already know which one it is. Give it its 10 minutes tonight. Ask it the 3 questions. Then close the account and go to sleep. It was never asking to be won. It was just asking to be closed.